Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Supply Chain Matters podcast, hosted by Bob Ferrari. Supply Chain Matters has consistently been recognized as one of the top internet blogs in the field of supply chain management. Our goal in this podcast series is to provide the best insights and thought leadership from guests experienced and knowledgeable in supply chain management. Areas to be discussed include business processes, advanced technology, and various industry and individual business product demand and supply networks. And with that, here's your podcast host, Bob Ferrari.
Hello to all listening, and welcome to Episode 3 of our Supply Chain Matters podcasting series. I am Bob Ferrari, the founder and executive editor of our blogging platform, and I will be serving as moderator of this podcasting series. For listeners who are not familiar with the Supply Chain Matters blog, it has consistently been rated as one of the top 10 blogs in supply chain management thought leadership. And since our founding in 2008, we have garnered a global-wide readership. This podcast medium serves as a supplement to the various published content on supply chain matters and our opportunity to present a more two-way conversational discussion of important topics. My guest today is Dr. Parag Khanna, a leading global strategy advisor, world traveler, and best-selling author. Born in India, raised in Dubai, New York, London, and Berlin, Parag is based in Singapore and represents the vanguard of global thinkers and entrepreneurs building the future world order from Asia outward. He is the founder and managing partner of FutureMap, a data and scenario-based strategic advisory firm. A widely cited intellectual, Dr. Khanna provides regular commentaries for international media to include Axios, CNN Global, the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, among others. He also frequently lectures at international conferences and provides tailored briefings to government leaders and corporate executives. Parag is the author of a trilogy of books on the future of world order, and his latest book, The Future is Asian, was the subject of a podcast interview that I conducted with Parag in January of 2019. In that first conversation, he provided our readers a tremendously insightful perspective on the growth of supply and manufacturing networks across Asia and how the next wave of Asian growth will move beyond China. With the launch of our new podcast series and with the current state of global-wide pandemic disruption, as well as geopolitical developments, I was thrilled that Parag took time out of his very, very busy schedule to speak to us. Welcome, Parag. It's a pleasure to once again have the opportunity to share conversation with you.
Great to speak with you again, Bob. Really looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. So let's get started. In your book, The Future is Asian, you outline the changing forces of trade occurring across Asia, along with a new renaissance of economic and technology growth, particularly across Southeast Asia. Now, since the book was published, trade tension among the United States and China has continued to escalate, despite the Phase 1 trade agreement. China was unfortunately the epicenter of the COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak, which subsequently spread across Asia to Western continents. Now, with 6 months of global supply chain disruption brought about by the virus, a good number of businesses and supply chain leaders are beginning to rethink their various supply chain component and finished goods sourcing strategies. What observations and insights can you share with our listening audience regarding how you believe advanced technology and population demographics will influence global sourcing of products, especially other Asian countries besides China?
It's a very good question to kick off with, Bob, and it's definitely the big picture. We need to look at not only the regional or interregional trade patterns and the supply chains that have been nurturing them from the standpoint of North America, Europe, and then Asia, but also look within Asia at how it's evolved technologically and, as you also point out, demographically. Some of the things, a few key salient facts that a lot of people are not, sufficiently familiar with, is that Asia is now or has 60% of its trade internal, and that ranks right behind Europe with 70% of its trade being internal. So Asia has achieved a pretty high degree of trade liberalization and exploitation of its complementarities far more than people realize. Now, that 60% internal trade means that even though there is, of course, a lot of Western outsourcing to Asia, and a lot of the supply chains are indeed intermediate goods that are exported outward to Europe and to North America, the fastest growing component of Asian trade is indeed that internal share. So even if there is, because of the U.S.-China trade war, some pressures around nearshoring, development of strategic industries by Europe and the United States, even if there is some pullback, and again, that's something to be debated and discussed, to what extent that's actually going to happen. You still have Asia is perfectly capable of substituting for that and producing for its own markets, with its own capital, with its own technology, its own corporations. And that's where the technology piece, in answer to your question, comes in. Because when it comes to Internet of Things, advanced manufacturing technologies, robotics, and so forth, the leaders in robot density, which is just one particular cluster of technologies that we can focus on as it affects supply chains and manufacturing, the leaders of that are Japan and South Korea. And China is coming up very quickly. Singapore is very strong as well. And in the aftermath of COVID-19, we already know what a huge effort is going to go into accelerating that automation, particularly in Asian countries that have high R&D budgets, that already have an aging workforce. So getting to the demographic part of your question as well. And so I think that there is going to be a lot of compensation and kind of, substitution of foreign resources. Now, that said, as a caveat, let's remember that, I believe that you're going to have a global supply chain model that will continue to follow the make where you sell principle. Now, Asia, from a demographic, wealth, growth, urbanization standpoint, is still the place where you want to be selling. Therefore, a lot of global supply chains are still going to find themselves in Asia. If not China, then Southeast Asia, or both, given that all of these countries have just entered the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. But when you take a step back for a moment, despite all the disruption of the pandemic and other variables, the fact is that you're talking about 4 billion people in the Asian region. Again, consumption growth, income growth, urbanization, high demand, and so forth. So I still believe that global supply chains will center on Asia, irrespective of whatever policy shifts we see elsewhere in the world.
You bring out some very, very interesting perspectives because, as you pointed out, a lot of maybe the multinational companies and other small businesses as well, they sourced in China not only for the low cost, but as you point out, for access to the local market. And as you point out, if indeed a lot of the internal demand now is coming from their own markets, do you think that sets up a conflict now in the sense that a country's going to get protective. Asian nations are going to get protective about their own markets. Do you think so?
Well, they already have been, if you think about China, obviously, and quite frankly, Japan as well. We think of Japan, and Japan is an advanced, modern, liberal democracy. At the same time, it has been highly protectionist. Now, it has entered any number of free trade agreements. It's just, moved closer to a strong one with the United States. It has one with the European Union. However, we know about the non-tariff barriers in Japan that have been pervasive in that economy for a long time. Similar effects, regulatory favoritism in Korea. China has built itself on that almost entirely with a state-led industrial capitalist model premised on adopting, attracting, stealing, advanced technology in order to substitute, and I believe in the case of American technology, permanently substitute imports of technologies, especially critical areas like semiconductors, that could suffer from export bans or export controls. So I think that that's very much part of the Asian model. Quite frankly, again, taking a big step back, this is how empires become superpowers in the first place. It is about import substitution, building up trade surpluses and currency reserves, and then investing in your own modernization and diversification. This is exactly the playbook that the United States followed in the early 19th century. So in a way, it's not so novel what China is doing. So yes, we are seeing the technology competition almost as an inevitable consequence of the way in which China entered the global economy, and it's the conscious strategies it's pursued. That doesn't mean, though, that there isn't a possibility of still, sort of profitable market penetration in China. We're right now, as we speak, we're still at a phase where Western multinationals make enormous revenues in China. They save costs by being in China. They are still, competitive on quality in China. And now it could well be that with the political pressure that both Europe and America are putting on China for reciprocal market access, that there could be some changes there. And, China has, within the context of the trade war, but looking far beyond the United States, has been reducing tariffs on every country on earth that is not named United States of America, right?
Yes.
It has purposely done so in order to accelerate this agenda of buying whatever it can, whatever it needs from anyone except the U.S. because of the trade war and the risk of export controls. But eventually there could be a new equilibrium between the U.S. and China, and there could be an opening of the Chinese market further. So I don't believe that these things are necessarily predetermined or linear when it comes to the economic dimensions of the relationship, even though there's going to be clear geopolitical tension for quite some time to come.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in China, I think one example that I wrote about was Tesla and their sourcing of the new plant in Shanghai, and what an enormous difference that made for Tesla itself. That was struggling to, to manage output, so to speak, and actually get through that milestone. But at the same time, you could see where, at least from my perspective or observations, the government was really embracing them, to come to China and to give them access to the market. Did you see that the same way?
Yeah, and I now do call that the Tesla model, the ability of a company to have 100% ownership of its domestic supply chain, of its showroom, dealership, sales, and so forth. And that is the result, of course, of the brand value of Tesla. Tesla obviously having, therefore, a certain degree of agenda-setting power in the negotiation to say, look, the wealthy automobile customers in China want a Tesla. They don't want some joint venture knockoff pseudo Tesla. They want the Tesla. And the same thing obviously goes for Apple. Right now, you have firms that have competed, that compete with Apple and that massively outgun Apple in the domestic market. Apple is a very expensive niche product, and this is why the Tesla-Apple model are very similar. Neither of them will have more than 2% market share in terms of electric vehicles or high-end smartphones in China, because Huawei, BYD, and others are strong competitors in that space, and the product is a premium product. However, the revenues for Tesla are fantastic, and for Apple as well. And that's why, again, despite all the calls for nearshoring and so forth, you don't actually hear Elon Musk or Tim Cook saying that they're actually going to, quote unquote, pull out of China. They will make more things in America and now, in fact, in India that they sell there, but they're not going to make things outside of China that sell in China.
Yeah, that's very perceptive, Parag. It's I often, when I write about both of those companies, it's like, wow, they're kind of shrewd at how they do this, and it shows exactly as you pointed out. And also, I think it gives a message like, if you have cool products, you're okay. If you have conflicting
in
products,
terms, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you better watch out if you have conflicting products. So let's stay on this theme of China, because I know for a lot of our listening audience, there is this notion that there are views among business leaders, economists, and strategy advisors as to whether China will always remain the world's factory floor simply because of the many years of investment in supply network capabilities and, all importantly, logistics infrastructure. Would you share those views of whether other nations, other Asian nations, may be able to leapfrog China in these areas?
Well, leapfrogging is going to be difficult. And I think, again, even just to answer the question, it all really does